Keep in mind, the exact same crimes what he's on trial for was the exact same crimes that was committed back then.
A lot of the people who are listening to Erica and interested in Erica are going to be robbed.
They refer to him as the billion-dollar gentleman when it seems more like he's the billion-dollar predator.
Welcome to Predator in Plain Sight, exposing Tom Girardi. I'm Chris Hansen, and this is the second episode of our three-part documentary that delves into the troubling and scandalous saga of attorney Tom Girardi. I'm joined by Kimberly Archie, respected legal consultant and advocate for victims. You might recognize Kimberly from the Hulu documentaries, The Housewife and The Hustler 1 and 2. Her journey with Tom Girardi began when she worked alongside him before any allegations against him came to light. This episode is about the victims, and Kimberly brings her unique insights and expertise to help us understand their stories. She's been crucial in guiding several of them through the complex legal landscape, helping them seek the justice and compensation they deserve after being impacted by Girardi's actions. Kimberly, it's great having you alongside to share your unique perspective. Can you start by telling us how you first became involved with Girardi victims? I believe it was a childhood friend, wasn't it?
Yes. So Kathleen Gomez is my childhood best friend. We've been best friends since 1972, or since we were 3 years old. So we're going on 51 years. And her family hired Tom back in 2010. She was one of the people that came to me first to say that she thought that Tom was misappropriating money. And it was really her persistence that led to the house of cards crumbling.
It's important to note that Kimberly will be testifying in Tom Girardi's criminal trial, which begins on August 6th in Los Angeles. Mark that date on your calendar because Kimberly and I will be offering daily trial updates once it begins. So be sure to take a moment now and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. Now, let's meet the victims of Tom Girardi.
1985, 86. So they had a program. They said, listen, if you tell us that you have an emotional, psychological problems, we will not discipline you or anything, but you got to come to us and tell us, and we are taking part of that responsibility.
Chris, this is Danny Barnes. Danny worked at the Lockheed Corporation in Burbank, California.
And that's where I found it out. They found out I had a mass. It was a mass in my chest, and they wanted me to go to the doctors after that. I was experiencing what I know now, a type of pneumonia, harsh chest irritation. But also, many of the women there, they were having major female issues. Also, many of the people, like my dad and a lot of other people who had already had 18 and 20 years of working there, they were not living 7 years past retirement. They were dying. And so the families were complaining. And so when I came back, they told me about this guy, this attorney named Timothy Larson. He was taking cases. And again, I was very outspoken. I didn't know how to be quiet, and I went to him. And that was around about 89.
Timothy Larson was a workman's comp attorney who represented workers in a lawsuit against Lockheed Corporation. The case focused on the company's alleged exposure of workers to harmful materials.
Timothy Larson said, yeah, we know. Yeah, you got this from here. And I'm going to be suing Lockheed for fraudulent concealment. You've been working around benzene and named a whole bunch of other things. And yes, a lot of people have been dying. And yes, we believe the cancer is linked to that. I knew it. Absolutely knew it. That it came from there. And so I signed. About 400 of us at that time. It ended up being 600 of us. And you would have your name on the list. So you would see numbered who you were.
Realizing the potential for a larger payout, Larson knew that partnering with someone of Girardi's caliber could significantly increase the settlement size. Acknowledging that the case was beyond his scope, he reached out to collaborate with Tom Girardi, who had the expertise to manage such a significant case. About 3 years had passed by then, and the legal target had grown significantly. Despite these plans, those involved never actually met Girardi or signed anything with him through Larson.
So let's say probably about from 90, 91, he goes in and he makes a settlement. We hear it. That's how I became aware of Tom Girardi.
So, Kimberly, there was a first trial, and there was a jury verdict of $760 million that included punitive damages. But then the judge ended up cutting that in half. What actually happened there?
So the Lockheed case is a typical, mass torts type of case, and you've got hundreds of victims. And so they'll put them into buckets, and they'll usually lead out with their best group and do what's called a bellwether trial. So it just sort of tests the waters. So there were 43 Lockheed employees in this group, which the jury identifies 38 as meeting the criteria. And so, the punitive damages were huge in this case, and it went back and forth, and the judge ended up cutting it in half. Still to this day, I can't really figure out, did any of those 38 people really see a significant amount of money? I haven't gotten an answer to that yet, and I'm not sure anybody has.
And so we don't know if any of these people actually got paid.
Or if they did, if it was anything significant. They were really good at, when I say they, meaning Girardi Keese, the law firm, were really good at sort of trickling out money, meaning, sending them a check for $5,000 to keep them quiet. So the squeaky wheel would get the oil, right? So they would just send out checks here and there to keep people happier, quieter, off their back. And I also feel like they would often do a number of defendants, so it would drag out the litigation, so that by the time victims realized they really hadn't gotten anything significant, it could be considered times barred or too late to sue for legal malpractice.
So now all we're hearing is you're going to get some money. You're going to get some money. You're going to get some money. And for a guy like me, who had already had Hodgkin's, non-Hodgkin's, and had surgery, and this miracle happened, I'm still alive. I was really horrified when I received the letter saying that there's something to the extent, as is a very tremendous, big deal, and we're doing the best we can. Also, you got to understand, at this time, Lockheed is on the hook with OSHA. They're shutting down. They know that they're contaminated the Burbank land, and they're supposed to be moving out to the South in Georgia and also out into the desert. So now people are being laid off. At that time, I was a senior shop steward. So that meant that I would be the last person there. So we get this letter, and in this letter, they're saying, you're going to end up everybody across the board with 38.5, something to that. And the attorney's fees are going to be taken out, and you're going to get a check for 25. And I never forget, I went off of the chain. I screamed to the top of my head. For me, having cancer and being in that condition. And I never forget, I'm on the phone, I'm crying, I'm talking to this guy, Timothy, saying, wait, I didn't do it, Danny, I didn't do it, he did it. It was that type of thing. And so many people came in and complained. We hear that they're gonna hire a retired judge, Judge Tanner and some other people, that's going to reevaluate everybody's position and let you talk to this retired judge and tell them what your symptoms and your injuries are. And then based on that, it could go, your settlements will go up to 100,000.
Kimberly, how did Judge Tanner deal with the payout sums?
So the judge in the Lockheed case, who really was a mediator, so he's a retired judge. So you get the feeling that he's a super important guy, but he's the mediator. One of his roles is to divvy out the money. But what most people didn't know at the time is that he was really good friends with Tom Girardi. So there wasn't really like this separation that you would expect, or that this guy is an independent guy making sure everything's being done right. So they're supposed to be giving people their money based on how seriously injured or harmed they were, or their future, what the cost of their future medical bills were going to be. But it really didn't turn out that way.
So the judge, the mediator, was pals with Tom Girardi.
Yes. And there's a big story in the LA Times about this big yacht cruise that a bunch of people went on, and he was one of them.
Does that smell like a conflict of interest to you?
Definitely. I mean, we see this pattern over and over in the cases where victims are saying that their money was stolen, is that you have this retired judge that, you know, when you're looking from the outside, they seem like this really amazing, respectable person that you would want in this position. But when you get to the bottom of it, they were buddies with Tom Girardi.
Now people are laid off. It's around 90, 91, 90, something like that, 92. Girardi sends out a letter and they said, hey, listen, you guys are suffering, and this is the way this has always went from there. You'd be at home, you'd look in your mailbox, you get this letter from Tom, the law firm, and there may be a check in there. We're happy to please tell you, here's a check for $10,000. We know that you've been suffering and going through so much and this, and we've been really working hard. In the meantime, this should tide you. So he sends us out this $10,000 check. People were losing their homes. We're being laid off. Lockheed is busted for these major health violations, and they're moving out of town. So we accepted the money. And then when we came in to see the judges, they said, listen, if you don't like it, then give us back the money. So I went back to Tom Girardi and I went back to Timothy Larson, and they both threw me back at each other. Oh, I didn't do that. He did. You still have your case. And it just, and I said, why haven't I went to court or anything like this? And they said, it's going to be a while. The people that are not showing symptoms are going to get the 38 minus attorney fees, and they're going to get this check for 25. And so I get this rollout, or this workers' comp ledger for $100,000, slightly over. And they took out 38%, which is unheard of, because in the workers' comp form, and on that particular form, guys, state law says you can get no more than 12% to 15%. See? And minus the $10,000 they gave me. And so they gave me a check for $58,000. That was it for Lockheed. That was it. I cried. Lockheed made a very wise move. They said, here's $100 million, lay it on the table. You guys, you attorneys can take this and we're out of it. And Girardi took it as the PI attorney. All of those checks was made to him. And it was made to him, Tim Larson, Jeffrey McIntyre, and some other people, but they were out of his law firm.
Kimberly, Danny really lays this out there as to how this worked behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they sued dozens of defendants, drug it out for years, nickel and dimed the victims, and kept most of the money at the end of the day.
This is a case, it would appear, where the victims were re-victimized as they were trying to find justice.
Yes, and if, the authorities, meaning the state of California or the California Bar or the Department of Justice, would have listened to victims like Danny Barnes, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this today the way we are.
Who was monitoring all this?
It really should have been the California bar and then, law enforcement.
I mean, this was criminal activity, allegedly.
I don't know if it's allegedly anymore, though. I mean, he was disbarred based on stealing from clients. He admitted to the media, particularly in the Ragomez case, that he had their money and didn't give it all to them. And he admitted under oath in his debtor's exam in the Ragomez case that he was out of money and all the victims hadn't gotten their money.
See, the LA Times got involved, and I think they did a magnificent job as reporters, and they wanted to know, where did this guy go rogue? They're trying to understand his psyche. Who would do such a horrible thing like this? This is short of Holocaust type stuff, right? You get all of these injured people, you take advantage of them. Know that they're not educated. They're just hard workers. And they're dependent on these attorneys with superior knowledge and skills. That is the reason they get paid so much money, because we put our trust and confidence in that legal system and the way that's ran. And he took the money, and he later said that he had to take it to fight the rest of the oil and chemical companies.
The situation was dire. It wasn't until 1995 that the full extent of the manipulation became clear. Documents falsely claimed that Danny had accepted a $100,000 settlement and consequently waived all workers' compensation claims, facing threats of receiving no further money. It was also revealed that all other claims, including those for discrimination and cancer from the exposure to the poisonous chemicals, were allegedly sold off. This realization highlighted the underhanded tactics being used. This raised a question. Was the initial $10,000 given to victims just a trap? It seemed they might have offered this money knowing well that the victims wouldn't be able to pay it back if they decided not to agree to the terms later on. Danny and various co-workers took their cases to the California bar.
We had pockets of people, 12 over here, 7 over here, 10 over here, were complaining. We went to the bar and they strung us along. And they first made us feel like, oh yeah, we're gonna look into this, this is serious. And they just ended up not doing nothing, saying that we didn't have enough information. Now, keep in mind, the exact same crimes what he's on trial for was the exact same crimes that was committed back then.
It all started in 2010. I went in for a simple procedure, quick and easy, and for a bladder issue, having 3 ginormous kids. I had incontinence issues.
This is Josie Hernandez, who sought Tom's help during a vulnerable time in her life after facing serious health issues from a medical procedure. Another example of the profound impact Tom's misdeeds have had on the lives of those involved.
I went to the doctor. They said, yeah, we'll implant a mesh and we'll be fine. And so I did. I started having problems. I noticed that I wasn't feeling better. I started getting more infections, and it just was going, I was having the same symptoms as before. I went back, and their solution was to implant a second mesh. And obviously that went from bad to worse. It took a while. It took, I think, a good year and some months before a doctor would take me seriously. Because there was a point where they couldn't really pinpoint what the issue was. So they kind of were telling me it was in my head, things like that. And I knew it wasn't. So when I was finally diagnosed, and they finally told me what was wrong, basically they said the mesh had eroded into my bladder and it was causing so much toxicity in my body that it needed to be removed right away. So I had several painful procedures to move and reconstruct and whatnot. Mind you, at the time, I was a immigration law paralegal. I had been with the company, actually in the field, for over 25 years, and with this particular company, close to 15 years. I had to stop working. I was on disability, and not to mention all of the things that it did to me, did to my body, the autoimmune issues, the pain, the depression, the anxiety, the financial aspect of my marriage. So it was hard. It was hard because all they knew was that mom was always in bed. So yeah, that's basically what happened. It was a nightmare. It was a total nightmare. I have a friend who is an attorney, personal injury attorney. I've never heard of Tom. And he said he is the top of the top attorney in the Los Angeles area. He fights for the underdog. He will make sure that you are compensated for your losses, for all your emotional suffering. He will go after the company for all the wrongdoing they did. He's just a pit bull when it comes to these matters. So I said, yeah, of course, let's do it. I need to be made whole. So initially, when he introduced us, we met with Ms. Sullivan. She gave us a lowdown on his track record and all of these wonderful cases he has litigated and won. And he said, definitely they could help us.
Initially patient with the slow legal process, by 2017, her suspicion grew as she struggled to get clear answers. This lack of progress led her to question what was really happening behind the scenes at Girardi's firm.
Initially, when we first signed up with him, they told us that it would be at least a couple years. And I worked in a law firm. I know that the system takes a while, so I wasn't too concerned. For the first couple of years, they had a lot of attorney turnover. My case had been bouncing around from different attorneys. And that was when I started getting a little apprehensive, like a little concerned, wondering what was going on. Because, like I said, I had a little bit of background in working for a firm, so I know that's not a good thing when attorneys start to leave. But I couldn't get any concrete answers from any of them. All they said was, so-and-so will be taking over, so-and-so will be taking over. So by 2017, I started going up. I started, asking for status, asking what's going on, and they kept saying, "Oh, we need this form redone." So I would complete something that I've already completed several times. They would ask me the same questions again. They bounce me around from person to person, and yeah, that's pretty much how it went. It was in 2020 that it finally hit me. That was the same year that Tom left me 3 messages, 2 on my cell and 1 on my home, my landline, telling me to hang in there, that he's fighting for me, and he just made it seem like my case was just so complicated.
Ms. Hernandez, this is Tom Girardi. I know you're so frustrated and mad and everything, and I don't blame you. I am too. There are certain orders that we have to get signed by the court. The courts are closed. We've had a hell of a hard time. We don't have them yet. But here's what. I will, if the Tuesday after Labor Day, we're trying to get these signatures on the Friday. If we don't have them on Friday, I will send you my personal check for this amount. Because I don't want you upset, and I know you are, and I don't blame you. Nothing is worse than going through something like this, and then some goofball lawyer doesn't send you the money. But anyway, it isn't our fault for sure, I promise you. And you'll have my check if I don't get this clearance on Friday before Labor Day. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, it turned out that Tom was just trying to use a bankruptcy from Josie's, past as just an excuse to say why she hadn't received her money yet.
I mentioned that case and they said, oh no, it has no bearing on your case. So I thought, okay, how is this now an issue? But he's the attorney, he knows more, until finally I saw on the news about that, the airplane, Lion Air case.
The U.S. Attorney in Northern Illinois is accusing 2 California lawyers of taking money that was supposed to go to the family members of victims of the Lion Air plane crash in Indonesia. One of them is Thomas Girardi, the husband of one of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. The Lion Air flight crashed into the sea near Jakarta in 2018, moments after takeoff. All 189 people on board died. It was the first of 2 deadly crashes in the Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes. Besides Girardi, attorney David Lira was also charged. According to the indictment, Girardi and Lira sued Boeing in a Chicago court on behalf of 5 family members of victims and eventually settled. Prosecutors are accusing the lawyers of using $3 million of the settlement money for improper purposes. The law firm's head of accounting and finance are also charged.
And I don't know what it was, but it just hit me. I said, this is exactly what he did to me, to my case. I don't know why, I just had that gut feeling. And later on, I get a copy from some attorney of a email that was sent to Girardi from the insurance company of the manufacturing company that we were suing, asking them to confirm receipt of my funds. So this was in May of 2020.
Girardi Keys settled the case for the relatively modest sum of $135,000.
Eventually, I did have to agree because the attorney that I was working with at the time, he told me that the original manufacturer was going under, that if I didn't take that amount, that I probably wouldn't get anything. So he pretty much scared me into just settling for that amount. So I said, oh, obviously, something is better than nothing. So yeah, they bullied me into accepting the settlement that they were offering.
Parts of San Bruno, California were turned into a raging inferno. It was a high-pressure natural gas line that ruptured, caused the explosion, and then fueled the spectacular blaze.
We became clients of Girardi Keys after a gas pipe exploded in front of our house about 14 years ago.
Next, we meet Kimberly's childhood friend, Kathy Rugomez, who turned to Tom Girardi for justice after her son Joe was severely injured in the devastating 2010 Pacific Gas and Electric pipeline explosion in San Bruno, California.
My son was burned over 90% of his body, and his girlfriend was killed, and he was given about a 10% chance to live. And while he was fighting for his life in a coma, we interviewed about 5 different law firms, and we ultimately picked Girardi Keys.
Kimberly, this is a case that's very personal to you. Explain why.
Well, Kathy and I's friendship, goes back so many decades. And when the pipeline explosion occurred, I literally the next morning threw my stuff in the car and drove up from Los Angeles to San Francisco to help her family. And I stayed up there for 6 months to help her family through this process. Her son was badly burned on 90% of his body. He was in a coma for months. And they lost everything that they owned in the explosion as well. I mean, it was just a devastating experience. And from the very beginning, there were lawyers crawling out of the bushes. They were in the cafeteria at the burn center. They were everywhere. And so initially, we had Erin Brockovich come up and do one of her famous town hall meetings, really thinking that we were doing this huge thing for her community. Her and I were so, we felt like we were lucky to have someone like Erin Brockovich, coming in just a couple weeks after the explosion. I mean, you got to think 8 people died in this gas explosion. 35 homes were burnt to the ground. The gas wasn't shut off for more than 90 minutes. So imagine this 100-foot wall of flames, like a gas torch just burning down the neighborhood. People were devastated. So we thought that this was like a little light in a dark time, that Aaron was going to come and do this town hall. And it just really didn't turn out the way that we thought it would. It was not Aaron Brockovich Part 2 at all. It was a nightmare.
Well, the town hall meeting with Aaron was like a bad scene from a movie, for sure. Aaron was not a likable character at all. We waited for her at the airport. We treated her like royalty. But when Aaron got into the car with us, she didn't even look at me. Like, she didn't even acknowledge me at all. And I turned around and I finally said hello to her. And she just was very much in a rush, because we were running late to go to the meeting. And we get to the town hall meeting and she just put on quite a show. She had leather hot pants on and she just strutted around and wasn't likable and wasn't very endearing. And the reason why I was saying about her, it being like in a movie, is because one of the people in the crowd actually yelled out, this is our real lives. This isn't Hollywood. I don't see how they sign up people the way she does it, but she was not a likable person. I thought she helped all these people, and it just didn't seem like that when she was at our meeting. That's why we didn't pick the law firm that she was representing. The movie is not accurate at all. Like, she's not there to help, and I don't think she ever has looked back at Hinckley since she did the movie, or before the movie. I mean, but she wanted credit for that, but she definitely did not help the people in Hinckley at all. Nothing's been done. Those people probably didn't get all their money, and they definitely didn't get any justice at all.
In November 2020, Erica and Tom Girardi announced their separation, with Erica filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, amidst Tom's escalating legal and financial troubles, including an involuntary bankruptcy filing in December. These troubles deepened, leading to Tom Girardi's disbarment in June 2022, following multiple charges, including misappropriation of client funds and dishonesty.
Hugely successful and praised Los Angeles attorney Tom Girardi, who has since been disbarred, now in even more legal trouble, indicted by a federal grand jury on 5 counts of wire fraud. It's alleged that Girardi and the CFO of his former law firm, Christopher Kamen, stole more than $15 million from clients.
In one case outlined in our indictment, Mr. Girardi settled a severely injured client's case for $53 million without notifying that client. And what's more, he then lied to that client about the amount of the settlement, saying it was actually for $7.25 million.
Some of Girardi's famous cases include representing Aaron Brockovich and representing Brian Stowe, the Giants fan who was severely injured during a 2011 incident in the parking lot at Dodger Stadium. Girardi is also married to Erica Jane, a Real Housewife of Beverly Hills, who has since filed for divorce following Girardi's legal woes. A 2022 lawsuit claims Jane was a front woman in Girardi's fraud and embezzlement scandal, but Jane has denied knowing about the allegations involving her estranged husband.
Attorneys are put in a position of trust when they represent us during some of our darkest times. Mistrust grows in the legal profession when clients can't trust their attorneys to pay them the settlements intended to make them whole.
But our investigation has revealed that, in fact, Mr. Girardi was robbing and stealing from those people who he claimed to be championing.
The allegations that sparked his downfall involved him stealing settlement money from his clients, notable cases including Josie Hernandez, the Rue Gomez family, and the victims of the Lion Air crash. These serious accusations triggered investigations that uncovered severe financial irregularities and ethical violations, ultimately leading to his disbarment. This is Josie Hernandez.
I was elated. Obviously, I was elated. I was very happy. I did not know that my case was one of the cases. I thought for sure they had already tons of other cases that they were reviewing, because this man's been in practice for how long. And so I actually did not know it was my case was specifically one of the ones that helped disbar him. But just the news of him being sparred, I was so happy. This man did not deserve to have a law license anymore.
After getting tangled in the decades-long mess with Tom Girardi, Danny Barnes has some practical advice on how to pick the right attorney.
Here's what I've learned over 22 years. Go to people that you could go to and say, hey, Joe, me and you've been buddies for a lot of years. You know what? I seen your problem over there. I know this real good attorney. And sit down and listen to them and see if that attorney is the one that you should go to. Not the ones that are being advertised on the media and the Google app. So if that makes sense, try to go to someone that you know. And we all know family members, friends, someone that you can rely on and trust their credibility, and then start looking for an attorney that way.
People are wondering how much Erica actually knew about Tom's financial wrongdoing and when she found out. This has sparked a lot of questions about whether she was involved or aware of the fraud happening around her. Pop culture expert Kiki Monique has her suspicions.
You know, there's this TikTok that I think it's so funny. I always think about it where, you know, it's a woman and the caption something like, I'm coming home to my billionaire husband and I find him cheating on me. And then literally she puts her sunglasses in and turns around and walks away. Because if you are with a billionaire man, sometimes you're just like, I don't care. Do what you need to do because I don't want to give up my lifestyle. And so I think there was an element of that. And when you have that element, you don't actually want to dig too deep because you're going to find, you know, there's already surface level things you're going to see and you're like, you don't want to find out too much.
There were signs going back a year or so, maybe more than a year, that something was really wrong there.
This is Law 360 legal investigative reporter Brandon Lowry.
2018 is when attorneys started to leave Girardi case, and it started to pick up a lot of steam throughout 2019, to the point where there were, I want to say, around 20 lawyers there around 2018, which is still less than its peak, which was closer to 40, but 20 lawyers is still a good sized firm. And then by the time the firm closed in 2020, there were, I believe, like 4 or 5 attorneys left, if that. So attorneys had been leaving because they'd been hearing things. There was a lot of debt that Girardi was taking on and that he was unable to pay. I found out recently that he had been seeking loans based on, I guess what I'd call fake cases. And he was telling people that he had a case that was worth billions of dollars, and it just was, it was a con. It was just, there's no truth to it. And he was trying to get companies to basically give him something like a cash advance or a line of credit on this $1 billion case, this fake $1 billion case. And obviously that would be fraud, right? If it was fake and he knew it was fake, and he almost certainly did. Some of these lenders came pretty close to giving him the money. And it's a little scary to think what would have happened. He would have been able to pay the Lion Air people, but then what? Who would get stuck holding the bag, right? There was the fact that he had failed to pay a lot of clients already, and that his own chief financial officer allegedly was siphoning money from the firm as well, and not just small amounts here and there. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars.
I feel the victims amongst the Bravo fans get lost.
David Yontef is the host of Behind the Velvet Rope podcast and a Real Housewives expert.
Like, everyone says they're pro-victim, of course, and they're so outraged. And, you know, you look at like Jen Shaw and they're so outraged by her victims, but the bottom line is, like, it's going back to how you feel about the housewife, right? So, like, I feel everyone was so outraged and everyone was so pro-victim when the world came for Erica. Now, I'm not saying that the shift has happened, because certainly I still think plenty of people dislike Erica because of all this, but it's like the power of the producer and it's the power of the edit Erica had a really bad season 2 seasons ago when all this was happening. Then she had a pretty bad season. And now it's not that this is faded, but like the producers say to themselves, well, here are the people we're going to fire, and we're not going to fire Erica. They're not firing her.
David had some of his own thoughts about Erin Brockovich and why she's yet to weigh in on the Girardi scandal really at all.
It is strange to me because, look, has Tom had bigger judgments in his career? Sure. Has Julia Roberts played those bigger judgments in a movie? No. Like, she is the biggest name associated with Tom Girardi. Not that it's the biggest case, but that just is what it is, thanks to Hollywood and Julia Roberts, period, the end. So it is strange. Like, how could it's not that she's out there doing interviews every day, but no one has asked her about this?
I mean, you couldn't ask for a better lawyer. I mean, that's why we picked him. I mean, but it's not true. I mean, they referred to him as the $1 billion gentleman when it seems more like he's the $1 billion predator because he's used all. And what's really sad is that the money he used to get a lot of his power by paying people or just all the different benefits everybody received from Girardi was actually paid with from the money from his victims. So we should actually have the power, but we don't. So, I mean, it's sad that the California State Bar can be bought like that with his client's money. So he doesn't even really have the power from just being rich and successful. He's got the power by using the money of his clients to get it.
So, Kimberly, where does this stand in terms of settlements for Danny, Josie, and Kathy?
Well, with our victims right now, we're stuck in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So the Regomez family are the only victims who've been paid back their money by the Girardi estate. Now, Josie has received some funds from the California Bar's Victim Fund, and Danny has yet to receive the rest of his settlement, along with the other thousands of victims over 4 decades.
In the third installment of our pre-trial series, our experts and victims will set the stage for Tom Girardi's upcoming trial on August 6th. Dive deep with us into the downfall of Girardi Keys, Girardi's claims of mental incompetency, and the defenses he's expected to present. Kimberly will be inside the courtroom, providing firsthand insights. Our daily trial updates will be packed with essential must-hear information you won't want to miss. Make sure to subscribe to stay fully informed. Thank you for listening. Until then, along with Kimberly Archie, I'm Chris Hansen. I'll be watching and listening.